Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I want to bring in a cat who has really carved out his own niche in the world of music. It's easy to play music in some ways, but it's really hard to make a living as a touring musician in 2020, and in a lot of ways you have to diversify and be a kind of a jack of all trades. And my guest is somebody who's had his hand in all types of music as a producer, an engineer, as a mixer, and also a music concert film director. Really decorated list of credits from it's all music really, and really been waiting to talk to him for a long time. Jesse Lauter, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that introduction, man. Just warms my heart to hear that,
man. Well, I mean, we all need our heart warmed these days, man. We're all kind of just caught up. Have you ever have you ever gone on like any kind of meditative retreat for a week or 10 days where you haven't ever been around people, where you've been detached from humanity? And I mean, just, you're in New York. I mean, I'm from Long Island originally, but it's just bizarre and kind of eerie. I just wanted to know how you were handling it.
Have I ever gone alone on a solo venture, silent meditation, or retreat? No, I haven't. I'm kind of, even though I'm an extrovert, I'm sort of a lone wolf. I'm single and, live alone and have lived alone in New York for over a decade. And I also live in a neighborhood in New York that's like kind of isolated, which is, I think, surprising to, it might be surprising to hear, but it's actually kind of even though there's thousands of people around me, obviously it's New York City. I live in a neighborhood called Inwood. It's like the last vestige, I guess you could say, in New York, like where it's like in Manhattan, so the tippy top of Manhattan, and it's actually kind of quiet here, and there's like nice parks and such, and you can even like venture out into the park that I live next to. It's called Inwood Hill Park, and feel like you're the only person in New York City. It's kind of an amazing thing.
Damn, I need to know. I mean, that's unbelievable, dude.
Yeah, they call it the best kept secret in New York, and here I am spilling the secret. But in this time, I've been just saying to myself how grateful I am to A, have a roof over my head, B, have a refrigerator with food, and know where I have a paycheck coming from friends, and not knowing what tomorrow, what lies ahead tomorrow, obviously in the weeks to come. It's scary, it's sad. So the only thing to be the 1,000th person to say this is that we just all have to be there for each other, and keep on keeping on, as Curtis Mayfield.
Oh my God, the best. I have to ask you right off the bat. I mean, there's one name on your portfolio that just flew into my. I could not believe that you had collaborated with this cat is Blood, James Blood Ulmer.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
Because I've interviewed Calvin Keys and other guys who like. Like they would be staying at these where they crash with blood, and I mean the guy was like, I mean the physics of the universe was on full display with that guy. It was like more like he was channeling like a Sun Ra spirit. How did you wind up connecting with him, and what did you work on with him?
Blood was working. All right, I was really lucky to be tied in with a guy named Kevin Calabro.
Are you kidding me, dude? That dude has been a lifeline for me. Kevin Calabro is. I mean, he's been a lifeline. What a legendary cat.
He's the best, man. I love
Kevin.
Dude. I owe Kevin a lot, man. I really do. I love that guy.
What do you tell me about what? Because I mean, he has been a gateway for giving me the Royal Potato family, and like being able to connect with my peers, because for the most part I've been interviewing all the graybeards. But for you, what did he do for you? Why has he been invaluable for you besides being a great person?
It was fun. I went to recording school at New York University, and it was kind of it's called the Clive Davis. Now called the Clive Davis Institute.
Oh my
At the
God,
time, it was
that's
called the Clive Davis
class.
School.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great program. It was a small program. I studied with these amazing professors. Bob Power, who was famous for doing early D'Angelo, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, just Erykah Badu, incredible engineer Nick Sansano, who did all the Public Enemy records with Hank Shockley and Sonic Youth. And so these guys were my professors, but they were like basically like what the idea of the program was that you spend your 4 years like kind of prepping for what they called the capstone presentation, and it's like almost like you're presenting your senior thesis. And it could have been anything, and for me it was just like I just got to present myself. And I was working with bands in college, and I had a band of my own in college, and so I basically like just presented my portfolio for this panel of music industry people, one of which was Danny Goldberg, the famous manager and publicist,
Oh, gee,
and
that's
a
crazy.
couple other awesome people were on the panel. But one of the people on that panel was Kevin Calabro.
No
And
way, dude.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my
And
Calabro.
I came into my panel presentation in a probably like in a funky suit, probably wearing a Stetson hat, but I definitely remember I was wearing a Grateful Dead Obama button. Now, I'm 33 years old, so I'm kind of young, I guess, in the scheme of things. But
Oh yeah, I mean, you've done a lot for that. Unbelievable, dude.
Thanks, man.
That's sick.
This was like I was graduating in 2008, and so that's when Obama was running. So I'm wearing this Obama Grateful Dead pin at my presentation, and so that caught Kevin's attention. But also one of the bands that I was working with in college called the Low Anthem, Kevin was a big fan of. So after the panel, Kevin and I totally clicked. He started throwing me work, and one of the first things was Marco Benevento, and he had me mix a couple tracks on a Marco record, and from there he had me do some overdub and vocal sessions with Blood, one of which was a track called Maya. I had a studio in Midtown. I'll never forget this, and not to talk shit about any of my peers, but I co-rented the studio, and when I had booked this session that I was supposed to be the only engineer on, and I told my studio partners who I was bringing in, James Blood Ulmer, they both like freaked out, and they like the night before, without telling me, they like preset the room for me with like his Roland amp and stuff like that, and like I walk Blood up the stairs, and he sees like the Roland amp out, and then he like sees the studio, and he sees these two engineers, and he's like, "What's the deal here?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Vibe's weird," and I'm like, "Yeah." And so like my co-partners in the studio nearly like tanked the session for me, and I had to like pull them aside, and I was like, "Guys, the Blood nearly thinking that I lost the gig."
Wait, hold on a second. I just want to be clear, because I mean, I'm not like. What was why was the vibe weird? It wasn't the kind
because they were like, "Oh my God, you're bringing this legend to our studio. Yeah. Like we're gonna like do all this for you." And like, hey blood, it's just like,
yeah, no, it's too much. Yeah, it's too much.
It wasn't a comfortable environment for the guy. But yeah, the track that always that stuck with me, that I did vocals and some guitar on, it was called Maya. It's funny. I think it was like scattered on a bunch of records, and I think he like sold these masters to like some random label in Germany or something like that. So I forget the name of the record that all the stuff that we did appeared on, but we did like 8 songs in a day, like of guitar and vocal overdubs. It was fun. Yeah.
What was the name of your band in college?
We were called the All Right Moz. I don't think you could find any of our music anywhere except for my closet.
Well, no, because I mean, and this is just fascinating to me. Like Calabro was hip to you guys, so you like were like more of a live band playing live.
The band that Calabro was hip to was the Low Anthem. That was a band that I was producing.
The Low Anthem.
The Low Anthem. Yeah, they were on None Such for a couple of records. That was the first band I ever produced. That was outside of my own band.
There's just a couple questions here that I wanted to work with you on, because I mean, I have like really live music has taken on a completely, since I started my trip. I mean, it's taken on a completely spiritual component, but modern in your mind, like you listen back to the Rita Coolidge album with with her on the I don't know self I don't know what the name of it was, but like like
Self-titled record, the first record.
it's possible, but I mean she's on the she just looked very beautiful. It has an Indian sort of vibe, Native American vibe, but like you look at the
Yeah.
back and it's like Lee Sklar and Booker T. Jones and
That's the first album. Yeah.
and
Rita's
and,
first
and
record.
like how how is it how close can you get? I mean, we are so sort of remotely based today. How
Hmm.
what is your ethos? What is the Louder Manifesto as it relates to getting everybody in the same room to play? Because it strikes me. I just have a very hard time
Mm,
falling in love with modern recorded music, and I
yeah, same.
wonder, and I just I don't want you to give away the secrets of the trade, but how have you tried to make the music warm? I mean, through all of this, in my own non-medical mind, it's like I understand that this virus is extremely contagious, but I actually feel like the
Yeah.
best remedy is vibration, like live music.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
Mm.
it sounds maybe it's Pollyannish, but how do you keep the studio sound? How have you tried to cultivate a warm sound in the studio?
Oh man, that's two different questions. How have I like try to create this sense of community and then also
Not even the community.
so
I just went off on
yeah.
the deep end because I just feel like right now the vibration is already low and it's getting lower because you
Yeah.
can't have any live music, or you can, but it's over.
Right.
It's over. Facebook or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But in general,
So
your manifesto and in getting the studio sound to be to touch your heart.
yeah, well, I mean, so much of it is I don't have any good like great answers, or secrets, I guess. And it's I love the Lauter Manifesto. Yeah,
Well, that's okay. There
I'll
there is
talk
none.
about.
It's I mean, is it different every time? Is it? I mean, have you?
It,
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, the thing that obviously, I think anything that I'll say has been said by, anyone who's come before me. So I'm not, I don't think I'm some genuine person who has a great thought on this matter. But to me, it all comes down to the players and the commune of the players, and if you don't have great musicians laying it down on tape, like then you got nothing, right? And thinking about the state of the world at this very moment, and the fact that those possibilities of in-person collaboration are essentially being forced out,
Right,
and
right.
again, CDC regulations for essentially for you to be in a studio with anyone. It's kind of it's sad and scary, and like, hey, you can have a tape machine. I've made great records on tape. I've made great records on digital. I don't think there's a formula for getting a warm sound. I think when it comes to that end of things, it's use what you got. But at the end of the day, great players, great songs, and I've been really lucky to work with a lot of amazing songwriters and players, and I think that's really the formula. That's it. And I was thinking, for whatever reason, you brought up like you know Rita Coolidge records, and looking at session players on those records, and that's like that's why you gravitate towards that music, right? It's like these people who really took their instruments and their crafts so seriously that they actually practiced and they actually played with each other, and they weren't so focused on how to make a buck, or get more likes and that sort of thing. It was literally all about the music, one thing and one thing only. So
Well, they also were
um
like, I mean, at the height of the studio scene, it was like those cats were raking, and I mean, it was just like they were making money, and they had 4 sessions a day. I mean, it was just
right,
it was
totally.
I because I mean, some people. I mean, I've done enough woodshedding with those guys to know that there were people that would come to those sessions and they wouldn't add anything, collectively to the group. I guess, I would love
Hmm.
to know, when you, it's so funny because, like, how you learn to tell people that you might have, that you were in awe of as an artist or musically, that their first take was just fine. I remember
Yeah, yeah.
Stephen Barncard, who produced all those early American Beauty albums, and like
One of
David.
my favorite engineers.
Yeah, and
That
so like
that
like he
name,
did like that
put that
epic.
on the top shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if I could only remember my name, which is the most haunting David Crosby album, and and Jerry, Jerry was doing pedal steel, and Steven's like, yo, we're done, Jerry. And the artist always thinks they can do one better. How did you learn to basically be like, no, you're good, like that's enough. You nailed it that first time.
I usually let them sort of like play it out, like I don't like to tell them. I mean, there's definitely been, there's obviously tons of scenarios where I've had to tell someone to stop, or in the kindest of terms. But I also feel like, I prescribe to the philosophy that the artist is always right, even when they're wrong. So if they want to keep going, like, I'll just let them keep going. Like, I don't really have like a clock per se ever. I'll follow that journey, and if you want to keep driving, I'll ride with you. But obviously, and they'll tire themselves out. And then it's like, to me, it's so funny. You bring up an excellent point. I always say this, like, without fail. It's like, no, like, always check out that first take, because like, 9 times out of 10, it might be the one.
It's going. It's going to be it's all, and it's always that way, And and so, I mean, at the end of the day, take like, how does that decision making process work? Because obviously in the studio, I mean, they're paying for studio time or whatever it does. You're gonna ride with them as long as they want to ride, but. Do they come back home to the farm and recognize, like, eventually you're like, this is the first take, and I guess as a producer, do you make that final call where you say, even if they want to take the 16th take, you're like, no, this one's like, do you make that final decision, knowing that your ears are telling you that the first take is the best?
Yeah, I'll, usually, like, when it comes to comping, like, and it's funny, so much of my work recently has been like mixing, that I haven't had to like comp takes together in a while, like, and we can get into that later.
Yeah.
But, when I used to be like way more active in, like, doing live sessions and takes and stuff, and then, like, deciding on what takes were best, I was a really good note taker, and I am a really good note taker, and I'd have my charts and stuff like that, and follow along and have songs graphed out by verse and chorus and stuff like that, check marks, check pluses, minuses, X's, or even sometimes I would not put anything just in case the artist were to see it and say, like, oh, why did you put X's there? I don't want to offend them. Don't have the patience for being in the studio, that they'll usually just, like, let me comp it. So the hope is that I just take care of it, and then I send them something, and they're like, oh, that's great. And, usually that works. So sometimes they'll, and hey, you can't always get everything right, and then you'll be like, hey, can I just hear this whole take and this whole take, and you'll send it over to them, and then sometimes they're good at giving directions on that front as well. When it comes to vocals, I think it's a very different thing. I usually tell singers, like, just let me do it. Let me take care of it. I got this. I got you. And then hopefully that trust is already there, that the singer will, like, entrust that very, very critical part to you if we have to comp vocal takes. So yeah.
Do you work? I mean, have you worked? I mean, this is like one of the things that is baffling and somewhat disturbing in the more mainstream, whatever is left of the industry. But you have a lot of singers. They might be very beautiful. They might have like thousands of Twitter followers, and and yet. They go into the studio and they sing, and they say, how did I sound? And the engineer said, terrible, we can fix it, come on up. And so, I mean, and that's scary to me, because there are pop artists, and we know, based on your cultivation of roots music here, I mean, pop music in the late 60s and early 70s was incredibly palatable. It was amazing. So there was some amazing stuff going on the radio. And that had a lot to do with the human beings who were playing the music, the accompanist and stuff. But have you, do you have a threshold. I mean, are you willing to? I guess my point is that that lack of authenticity leads to, for like my daughters and other younger cats. Can they detect the real true artistry if what the pop music market is putting out is just what people are? They're dressed like cowboys or they're dressed like certain, but they're not really that. They don't actually can't even perform live. I mean, have
Right,
you know?
right.
I mean, and I realize that some people have to do that to pay the bills. But I mean, have you, is there a threshold for Jesse Lauter? Have you ever gotten into that where you're like, I have to fix this whole thing because this person just really can't. They're not really.
Yeah, I've been there before, and usually in those records are, they're very frustrating and they're soul sucking, and sometimes, and then you do it because
Right.
you. But I do kind of have rules now. I gotta say, man, I'm so like, not to sound like a fucking just a woo woo millennial, but I do feel blessed to have worked with some pretty amazing singers.
Absolutely, no, dude, that's
really
where it
don't
starts,
have to-
man. That's a blessing, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I don't think like I think auto-tune and that sort of thing, like, it's a tool, it's helpful, and you'd be surprised how many people use it, and everyone basically uses it at this point, like to correct. Like, if it's a correcting tool, it's fine. The hope is, like, band, singer, go into the studio, hit it, quit it, done. Old school, we're done. We got this. And the production's really done in the arrangement and then in the sonic quality of the mix, right? But we know how the world is now, and it's just not that way anymore. I feel like, like, we've moved past that point, where those correction tools, like, can be helpful. I do pitch correct if necessary or called upon, or if I think it's going to be helpful. And also, there are times when pitch correction and things like that are used, like, in really, really cool ways by, like, some of the greater, rootsier artists. Like, and people have been doing it for a while. Like, I always put on my top shelf on a production level the Ry Cooder, like, I Flathead, Chavez Ravine records, where he's, like, totally using auto-tune all over those records. I mean, but as an effect, not in the T-Pain way.
I love this. I love that. How's he using it as an effect? I don't know if I was even hip to that.
You can listen to it on Drive Like I've Never Been Hurt. It's just sort of like, it's kind of like a harmonizer,
Right.
and it could even have been a harmonizer at the time, but it sounds like auto-tune. Someone who definitely used it on a very popular record, it's almost been 10 years, I guess now, is the Raising Sam album, Robert Plant. You could totally hear auto-tune on his voice on that record, and I love the way auto-tune is used on Plant's voice on that record. And he was using it as an effect. Robert Plant doesn't need fucking production, philosophies is like, take a step back. Is it dope or is it not? Yeah, it's dope. Use it, But is it dope?
Right.
Yes, indeed, it is dope.
I mean, this is,
yeah. Sorry.
we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't know if you're going to know who this is, but I want you to pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Yes.
And so,
well, actually, he was in high school. I was in junior high. He was in high school with my older brothers, and he was quite the character back then. He got thrown out of the Hollywood High School Orchestra for turning his flute music upside down and playing it with the orchestra. So the teacher went, "You're out of here." But here's the freakiest thing of all: the person he took lessons from was a student of my grandfather's back in New York. I thought that was just too,
yeah, that's the universe at work, man. That's pretty heavy. Yeah, that won't give you a lot, because
it's hard to hear over the telephone.
No, I know it's hard to hear. That's how you came on my radar originally. Is that was my interview with the late great Paul Barrere, and he was talking about how Lowell went to high school with his older brothers and wound up taking lessons from a dude who took lessons from Paul Barrere's grandfather, who was as Paul told me, was a flautist, which in real terms means an unemployed flutist, a flute player. So I mean, this is like that. And then the reason it came on you came on my radar was because my friends had a chance to attend this great Little Feat homage that you put together
Right.
with Tony and Leone and Jeff Hill and the late great Neil Casal.
Neil.
And so I mean, how did that? I love it because Little Feat, to me, they were so like greasy and they were awesome. I mean, there was obviously tremendous dysfunction in Lowell. Unfortunately, really he spun out of control at the end. But they were so unique and so interesting, and I was just wondering why you were inspired to do something like that and how it all came together.
Ah, man, I've done several of those sort of like larger scale, many artists pay tribute to something. I've done albums and concerts, and Little Feat is just, an all-time favorite band of mine. I've been a fan since I was a kid. I give credit to my mom for that one. Yeah, totally.
I dig.
Chicken record, yeah.
Dixie
Atlanta.
Chicken, yeah.
I'm from San Francisco originally, and so I was raised mostly in Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't know. I think maybe like Atlanta sort of like resonated with me as like a teenager, and God, I remember I'm totally going to give myself away. It's like such like a child of the jam band scene.
Well,
but
that's fine.
I saw the String Cheese incident
Sure.
sometime in the late 90s, and they did Atlanta, and I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I remember listening to a bootleg of that just over and over again, and getting all the other Feat records, Feet Don't Fail Me Now, and then discovering the sanctity and the beauty of Waiting for Columbus, learning about all the connections with Zappa, who I was a huge fan of, like at a very early age with the first record. And so I've always just been a huge, huge Little Feat fan. See him anytime they would come through New York. Miss the fuck out of Richie Hayward and seeing him live. And and I think really what it was that 2017 when I did that show?
Yeah, it was definitely in that pocket there. It was a couple of years because I interviewed I interviewed Jeff Hill right. Yeah, it was in 2017 because I interviewed him, Jeff, right after that, and that's when he dropped your name as the person who was sort of the grand master behind that.
We did it sort of as like a 40th anniversary of Waiting for Columbus was the idea. We weren't doing the full record, but like we're going to do a full tribute to Little Feat 40 years after Waiting for Columbus. And it was such a special night. That was fun. That was a fun night of music. I mean, Tony and Jeff were like the perfect battery for that house band. We also had John Lideau and Sean Walsh from the National Reserve.
I love Lideau so much, dude. That dude's the fucking man, dude.
And I mixed Lideau's his new album.
Dude, that dude is salt. I mean, there is a special. Like, when did you first come in contact with Leone and Hill? Was that through Calibro too?
Leone. Actually, you know what? I don't think Tony really knows this, but I think and we'd probably have to like reestablish if this is like actually true.
Well, we can reestablish that immediately, dude.
Yeah, I had a great. Oh my God, everyone's got stories, right? But I had a great little. I was very lucky in college to have a Levon connection.
Please break this down. Please break. Can you break? Levon, dude. I mean, come on.
I was working with a guy who went to college with my sister. His name was Dan Teicher, and I was gonna mix some tracks for his like EP. And Dan would do these like very large scale productions. Kind of at the time, it was definitely weird music for me to be working on. I love Dan to death, very sweet guy. But the guy who was producing the record was Chris Edwards. Do you know Chris?
No, I don't know that name.
So Chris was one of Levon's drum techs and engineers, and he was the guy behind the console at the Midnight Ramble, not front of house, but the recording console.
Sure.
So he was like, so if you guys ever go to the barn, there's the stage, and above the stage is the studio. And sometimes you see people lined up right there. That's the control room. And so Chris would be back there. And so I was in college, and they couldn't pay me. They were like, yeah, we're getting Jesse for free. So the trade-off was I could go to Levon's whenever I wanted.
Oh, that's such a great. I mean, that's such a great.
And I'm like, deal.
Oh man, dude, that is so great, man.
Yeah, so that's how I initially got to meet Amy and got to meet. I think that's where I first met Tony. Got to meet a lot of people in there.
Was he was working with like? Was he working with like Olabelle at that time, or was that like?
Yeah, I think the Olabelle relationship was still there. I'm sorry if you're hearing that buzz on the other line. Someone's trying to call me.
No, you sound really snug right now. It's good.
Yeah, I met a lot of people in the barn. I met Elvis Perkins in the barn, and that was the beginning of a very one of the great friendships and creative relationships I have in my life. But the first time I ever met him was at the barn. And yeah, man,
what about Garth? I mean, do you hang with Garth?
No, I've never met Garth.
Dude, Garth is so. I'm trying to catch a hang with the guy, but I mean, like that spirit was like. Was there a palpable? I've never actually been up there for a gig. I know that like it's a very powerful place and spiritual place, but I mean, what was the essence? I love listening to Levon talk about Toronto, being able to go to see Oscar Peterson or, go to see, I mean, there was just so much going on. And the truth is that, again, he's from Arkansas. I've interviewed the Hawk. They're from Arkansas. And then you get like Rick Danko, who's like a butcher, like Robbie Robertson was like from a rugged cabbage town, very rough area. And it was like, I mean, I'm not even sure if there's a question in this. It's just, was that Big Pink Brown album essence there how would you describe that? I mean, and what is that? What is some of the lasting essence of Levon that you still carry with you today?
Well, I've got a twofold story for you. I mean, like, I think my initial visits, when the Rambles were getting started, and I was there in the first, couple of years when it was happening, when Levon was still around. It was awesome. I think if anyone was there, like in the beginning, would know that it was way more lawless and like definitely more reckless. Like, like people were you could bring your own booze and all this stuff, and they weren't pulling people over as they were leaving.
Oh my God, that's right.
It became very strict. So I'm kind of like one of those guys. Like when I, even after Levon passed, they maintained very strict rules. Like I think there's like a no photo rule. I don't know if that's still the same. And I it's which is definitely a more open vibe. And I mean, it's just like one of the coolest places to go visit. Like it's a dream to be in that room. It's an incredible space. You go walk the halls downstairs, you see all the memorabilia, photos of Levon with Muddy and, just all sorts of stuff. I've met all sorts of amazing people in that place and, stories for days. But I think the thing that I need to say, I can't answer a question about is the vibe of Big Pink, still alive there, is without telling you. It's not something that, is really publicized, that I actually nearly started a concert series from the basement of Big Pink.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Dude, that would have been the coup of a life. I mean, you could.
One.
Oh my God.
We did one with Dawes. Yeah. It was, and I filmed it. And it was before Dawes was as big as they are now. But that was one of my first forays into trying to produce and direct some sort of film thing, moving out of just the studio land and trying to do some more video stuff. But it didn't work out. I'll just leave it at that. But I spent some time in the basement. I've even slept in the basement.
That to me, that is it's already hallowed ground. I mean, this is just having a ball here with Jesse Lauter. I mean, I'm 42, but you're like almost a decade younger than me. I mean, you grew up in the Bay Area?
Born in San Francisco, grew up in Atlanta.
Okay, so you really never you never were marinating in the Bay, in San Fran though, but you
I can't. I claim San Francisco because I did marinate. We actually moved around a bit, and I spent all my summers in San Francisco. I'm a sixth generation San Franciscan, and my parents have we have large families on both sides that are still all in the Bay Area. So,
oh my God! So I mean, tell me a little bit about. I mean, because my second book is about to come out on on the original Merry Pranksters and Wavy Gravy and Wavy Gravy and how they set the table for the Grateful Dead. I'm just curious, like, what I never saw the Dead before, and I don't think I would have wanted to in the '90s per se. But I mean, beyond that, what was your understanding of the lineage of San Francisco sound to you? Being that you obviously had a huge lineage, and I'm very fascinated by it, and I oftentimes don't want to neglect the Airplane and Big Brother, and obviously the Sons of Champlin. There was just so much going on. But from your perspective, what was it like for you? Because it wasn't all like, you can get real Grateful Dead-y, and rightfully so. I mean, people are obsessed with that stuff. But what about you? I mean, what is your understanding of the lineage of the regional sound there?
Yeah, and I could definitely have I could go on for days about the topic, and I think you can't mention San Francisco without mentioning Sly and the Family Stone, or the Bay Area in general without mentioning Creedence.
Santana,
Carlos. I'm a huge Flaming Groovies guy. And also if we need to get into funk, which is we could Tower of Power.
Oh my! Well, I mean, what I'm saying is that you were. It's so interesting because it's like it was such a hot. I mean, you were way too young to experience how insane that was. For sure. But I definitely have stories, and it's funny. Like I've been thinking a lot about the concept of time and stuff. Like I was born in the '80s, and even though it's funny how like the concept of like a Monterey Pop or an Altamont is so distant to you when you're young, but like when you become older and you kind of understand years, and even though that those events have moved away from you, it's like, oh well, I was only 20 years, less than 20 years after I was born, right? And so it's like you're still like, those energies are still there in the universe. And it's funny, it's like for me, it's like my family goes so deep into San Francisco life and culture that it's like my grandma, who may her memory be for blessing, and was a huge influence in my life and the way I operate on a day-to-day level, and I could get into that. She worked in civil rights and also was a Jewish professional in the Bay Area, but she like busted out on me like in my 20s. My grandmother set up one of the first Holocaust survivor networks in the country, and it was in San Francisco locally. And if you know anything about Bill Graham, you know that he was a Holocaust survivor. He used to. I've interviewed all his right hand men, and they used to say he was incredibly philanthropic, and he would never talk about it. But he was always
Well, he would go to this. It was basically like like an AA meeting for not anonymous, but for survivors.
Absolutely.
And so all the local survivors would go, and my grandmother would lead the meeting. She organized the group, and was one of the first in the nation to do such a thing. And so she was close to Bill Graham on that level. And so, I mean, she wasn't like a music person on a rock scale. She loved like show tunes and jazz and stuff. So I just never thought of my my grandparents in that regard. And then like one of my grandma's closest friends, a guy named Max Keith, who I've known ever since I was a baby. I was sitting with him. He passed recently, and this was like 6 years ago, and he's like, "Hey Jesse, how's all the music stuff going?" And I'm like, "It's good, Max."
It's good, man.
An off the talker type, and I was good. He's like, "Did I ever tell you I used to manage the Jefferson Airplane?" And I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" And so it's like, and he was like, "Well, I was a lawyer in San Francisco. And, there weren't like a lot of managers around, so I was their lawyer. And then they fired who was supposed to be their manager. And then I was the manager for a little bit. So I was the manager and lawyer. And I was like, so stories like that don't, surprise me. And, Yeah, like when it comes to the Grateful Dead stuff, it's I was in Marin when Jerry died. My grandparents lived in Ross, and I'll never forget it. I was definitely young, but it definitely left a very big impression on me. I woke up. Actually, it's a weird story, and I have a really hard time telling this publicly. And I actually have but I'll say it. They probably won't hear it. But I have a lot of friends in the Grateful Dead camp in that world, and I love them all very much.
Yeah.
But I woke up in the middle of that night. I'll never forget this, from a nightmare, like as if something passed through me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and I was like, something crazy just happened, and I couldn't go back to sleep. And then I finally rode out of bed at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., and we were probably some of the first people in the country to know because we got the Marin IJ, Independent Journal, and my mom was already awake, and she showed me, and it was already on the front page of the paper, and I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And I was like, I was a young fan at the time. My parents were not Deadheads. My uncle was a Deadhead. But no one in my family really cared for the Grateful Dead. They actually scared my father.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm telling you, man, they were so. I mean, I think that I probably. I don't think I would have even been hip enough to know what was going on if I was really,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but the thing is that, just for the record, that was pre-internet, and I was actually up in.
Right.
I was up in at my Jewish summer camp in the Catskills, not too far from, near Rhinebeck and Red Hook, and I remember the paper came out. I don't know if it was the next. Yeah, it was either the next day. It was the Poughkeepsie Journal or whatever, and there was a big picture of Jerry on the front, and I had really not gotten into the Dead, and I recognized that something titanic had happened, and my counselors were like, huge Deadheads. But yeah, I mean that's pretty amazing that you were channeling that spirit. You felt that when that woke you right out of bed.
It's a true story, no bullshit there. And the other things that I remember from that time, and it made a pretty lasting impression on me, was we were only about 10 miles down the Sir Francis Drake from Forest Knolls, where my aunt and uncle actually live now, and where Jerry passed. And so I'll never forget it. There was this huge trail of rose petals outside of my grandparents' place that we followed, and I remember seeing an effigy of Jerry, and it developed in a day or two after he passed.
Gosh.
And then we actually went through the park for the memorial service. But so I'll never forget that. I never saw the Grateful Dead with Jerry, but I feel like that was probably the closest thing to I take that back. I've seen a ton of the post Grateful Dead shows, but I love the Grateful Dead. They're one of my all-time favorite bands. I see, being I could geek out about them for days.
No, I'm going to ask you this question, but this is really important, though. I mean, because you mentioned. I try to get out there. I can't stop getting enough of Marin County. Just driving over the bridge, and Marin City. George Duke grew up there, but I mean, it was more really housing for people of color, and it's changed so much.
It's interesting talking about the bridges. I'll to not to name drop, but a story that I just to talk about, just this is life. It's if you're involved in your community and in arts and creativity, you get involved with people, right? I would just reflect that story about my grandmother and Bill, and then my grandparents' friends, Max with the airplane. So my family's business was in engineering and steel, and they were involved in the construction of the Richmond Bridge, which is
oh my God, I'm obsessed with them. I don't think you have to pay a toll on that still. I don't know if you have to pay a toll on that.
No, you can't. You do. There's
okay, you have to pay a toll,
when you're going north.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you know, but Terrapin Station was the story supposedly is that Jerry is riding. I think it was Jerry was riding, driving his car from the East Bay to Marin, across the Richmond Bridge, and there's like a lightning storm happening, and he comes up with the music for what would be Terrapin Station on this drive, and he calls Hunter when he gets home, and Hunter's like, that's crazy, I was watching the lightning storm as well, and I wrote these words, and he basically put the words to the music, and they created like the great opus that is Terrapin Station. So to feel like my family was like cosmically, entwined in that creation process, just because they were involved in the making of this bridge, and I have this photo that I took that I could send to you, that I took driving across the Richmond Bridge of Mount Tamalpais, and that Trixie Garcia is a friend of mine, and that I actually sent to her, and have it hangs framed in her place.
That is so. I mean, dude, honestly, I've heard. Yeah. I read that story. I didn't know what bridge it was. I thought. So Hunter was watching the storm from like his window, and Jerry was driving across. I didn't know it was the Richmond Bridge, and then they fused that. That's. And it's really tapping into sort of this. I mean, they were so off the beaten path. But I don't. Listen. Here's the bottom line. I mean, this is what I want to talk to you about, because I mean, you're not somebody who can. You're everyone's trying to sing for their supper. But here's the point: is that even at that time, music truly came out of communities, and the regional sounds of music came out of communities because you could actually afford to live there. And now it's like I wonder how you feel as a cultural enthusiast and somebody who's an artist and somebody who likes to create beautiful art. I mean, it is impossible to. I don't know what to make of our. I don't know. I think we might live in one big civilization now and very little culture. And I mean, the culture is sort of like. Santana, that music came out of San Francisco. All those guys met there. They shedded there. The Carlos Santana. Most of those guys, some of those guys weren't even. Most of them were skiffle players. They like picked up instruments and were folk players. Yorma and those cats. But yet they could. It all just bubbled up in the cities, and I just wonder how you go back now and look at it and say, not just the inequality, but also just the depravity and the strife. I mean, it's really hard to. There are pockets of San Francisco, again, on the bus, and I'm driving, and I go through Chinatown or certain parts. I say, okay, this still feels like a funky place, like a cool place. But I don't. Yep. How do you even? I mean, do you even recognize it anymore?
No, I don't. It's really difficult for me to go there.
Yeah, I
it's
bet.
Even more difficult too. Like, if all my grandparents are gone, and every time I go back, it's like the place where I feel like the most sanctity and divinity is like where my grandparents are buried. I was really close with them, and they're buried in the hills of San Rafael. And
it's beautiful.
It's like but that's life. I think it's amazing what the tech world has given the world, but at the same time, they definitely kind of pillaged a pretty awesome place with no respect for its culture. You wish that tech people were a little bit cooler.
Well, and also it's like, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I'm just a naive, radio host, but it's like you look at the back. If you look at the back of a baseball card from the '80s, there were like utility infielders they're like, in the off season, Greg Gross runs a gas station in Texas. Like, these people weren't paid. They weren't paid like beyond generational money, where it's like, how did we get so perverted where someone's worth was this much, but yet, when it comes to other stuff, it's not. I mean, that's the crisis to me in this society, is like, how that. I don't know. I'm always searching for new musical vocabulary, and I realize we're all interconnected, and I realize that we're not going to go backward, but at the same time, I wonder, I guess my question is for you, where do you see music, holistic music going? How healthy is I mean, setting aside this insane virus for 1 second, which is hard to do.
But even though that's kind of impossible.
It's kind of impossible because it might have a major impact long term. So where are the? Do you think like the flyover towns in this country are where the? I'm just trying to figure out the lineage of the music. How will it continue on? Because I know, like, again, our late great friend Neil Casala, everybody looked at him. A lot of younger musicians who looked up to him were like, I want to have that life. I want to have that kind of life. And even so, I hung with him in Long Island before the last domestic CRB shows, and he was like, I'm broke. You know, it's like and he's like, nobody that's making music or doing this kind of stuff is getting ahead. And that's really pretty daunting, you know, and I wonder, not that you have a crystal ball, but where is the silver lining here for so many authentic, beautiful cats who are living in a time when, this goes back to my tech thing, where it's like, do we understand that a musician is a credible profession and not just music is a musician's gift to the world? You can riff on that any way you want.
I don't have a good answer for you.
But you feel what I'm saying, though. Yeah.
I totally feel what you're saying. I do have one thought. I mean, like, for me on a personal level, like, it's always been a matter of survival. I think, you know, I'm in a pretty unique situation in New York where it's like, and I don't have a studio. I actually keep a part-time day job, and I feel freaking blessed to have that right now. I don't need to go into the details of what that is. It's in production.
Dude, good for you.
But,
that's
you know,
great.
yeah, man, right now I'm like,
damn.
Okay. You know, I've thought about leaving that job a lot over the years, and
well, now you know why you didn't, though. Yeah, it's just insane.
Yeah, 100% survival. But you know, I say this. I've said this. I've said this for a long time. I think the thing that, you know, I think that there's like a really big void that will need to be filled sooner rather than later in that sort of Grateful Dead Fish vein. The fact that there aren't more bands sort of like following that blueprint is kind of surprising to me. And the bands that seem to do follow that blueprint kind of suck.
Explain in your mind, what is is it just like shedding at college? Like, what's the blueprint in your mind? The
blueprint is creating a unit that is unbelievably well rehearsed, plays unbelievably well together, is consistent,
and fearless though in some ways too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and essentially has created a profound, rich universe that attracts thousands of people, and that thousands of people want to sink their teeth into, and basically can think about every day with passion. And you know, I don't think there will be another Grateful Dead. I don't think there will be another Fish, but I like those bands are going to be. I mean, Fish is going to be gone at some point down the line. And you know, I'm just surprised. I think there aren't bands that they're like you know, I just don't feel like bands practice anymore. You know, who's gonna be the next Fish? Like, people are like My Morning Jacket, and I love those guys, but it's like they don't play enough, and they don't really care enough about having that sort of like, you know, gypsy following, you know, the hole that Fish and the Grateful Dead music, or Dead and Company now, fill for, you know, so many people. And I work with a band that I freaking love. I just don't think that they necessarily have like the cross-generational impact that I wish they did, and that's the Tedeschi Trucks Band.
Right.
And I think they're freaking amazing. And there's things like we're trying to push, you know, the Tedeschi Trucks you know, sound to, you know, new generations. It's sort of what, you know, I'm trying to do with my film projects with them, and we're also trying to release more of their live music. Like, whereas Fish, it's like, I feel like Fish has just been ahead of the game for years. It's like, you see now, like, literally all my social media feed is just like people live streaming everything. Like, oh, live stream, and Fish has been live streaming since 2003. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, yeah, they have this figured out. You know, they've been ready for an apocalypse for a long time, right? Like a self-isolation apocalypse of music. And it was kind of amazing too. I don't know.
A self-isolation apocalypse, man. I've never heard that is the term, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, and Trey actually that has released 2 new songs in 2 days. So I haven't checked them out in full, but they popped up on my Instagram feed. Like, very smart. Do it, man. People need new tunes right now. They're yearning for content. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just like everyone's got to look out for themselves right now. And honestly, I think the hope is that, like, if your music speaks for itself, then hopefully people will listen and will come to you. Hopefully you'll be financially secure to make that happen, but you have to take the necessary steps to make that happen. And
I just wonder.
Unless you're a rich kid, it's very hard to make it work in a major city, like any major city right now. It's expensive to live in Nashville now. It's expensive to live in Austin now. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're nailing it. It's just like I mean, I've interviewed everybody in the original Mahavishnu Orchestra multiple times, and I mean, those guys they shedded at the beginning for a few months. It started really with Billy and John just down in Soho, back when you could get a loft for $400 a month, and they were playing live so much, and the type of music that they were playing was so improvisational and on the razor's edge, and I still don't necessarily get off on that kind of music all the time, but the point is they were playing live so much that they didn't necessarily need to practice. I mean, they were already shedding on the bandstand, and I mean, that's, to me, is the existential crisis, is a legitimate touring circuit where it's not like you're going to if you go and do a Mountain West tour of Boise and Utah and Salt Lake City and Colorado, and you're not Dead and Company, but you're like another band that you're going to walk away with like some like you're going to be able to get ahead a little bit. And the problem is that they're making you get gigs and you see a place like the Brooklyn Bowl and it's sold out and you're like, oh, these cats are making good dough. But actually, after you pay everybody and you put money back into the recording thing, it's just harder to get ahead now. Whereas you look at all the cats we've been talking about, Levon and the band, or Garcia, those.
Well, I think that I think one thing too, and maybe these are like a couple ideas. If someone's listening out there, just like trying to look for the great big idea, like a couple things that definitely stick with me in a way. It's like I think obviously with some of the older bands, like that speaks so much to the songs and so much to the culture around those songs, right? I think with like a Fish, and it's like a band I think about a lot in this day and age, like why aren't more people doing something like that? And everyone who's doing something like that isn't really following that blueprint, but it's like Parliament Funkadelic. Like, give something people could sink their teeth into and be like, like a comic book. Like, essentially, like that's what George did, right? He like effectively created a comic book band, right, with Parliament. And like everyone, you have all these characters, and like you're creating the subculture within your band already. And with like Fish, you are creating a subculture within like the breadth of that catalog, right? And the covers that they choose are like, some of them are like staple classic rock songs, and some of them are like pretty weird. And these fans get like really granular and really into it because of those reasons. So like, I know it's like hard for just to say to a band like, hey, like go out there and create your own subculture and like create that people like want to attach themselves to. Like, I mean, so much of it is that, like at the front, like Fish as Trey, people love him and all the different personalities in that band, and like Parliament Funkadelic have so many different great personalities, and people, you become fans of each member of the band, right?
Absolutely.
Like that doesn't exist right now. Like that's like what band exists where that is the case?
I agree.
I don't know.
I mean, it's there's a lot of it's a very I'm not sure. The show is not about getting answers, but I just think the questions sometimes are the answers, in the sense that a revolution. People are waiting for a revolution of consciousness in this country, and I've interviewed George Clinton, and obviously all the bands that there was a there's a psychedelic component to all of these bands that we've been talking about, and part of that is like that collective trip that you go on. George Clinton was. I mean, we talked about LSD and yogurt, and I mean, he was like, dude, without LSD, that ended the Vietnam War. You had people putting flowers in guns of soldiers. I mean, it was, and I'm not, we're in sort of this hysterical, very fear-based time, and a lot of it is real. It's very real. But I think that the part of it was obviously the stories were insane, Barlow and Hunter and those amazing lyrics, but there was a component.
I think also, and I think the other thing too, like speak to George's point, and I think the thing that a lot of people can't put their finger on, and being a student of history, and I love history, is I feel like this situation, and I've seen this meme pop up a lot, like the government asks your parents to go to war, like they're just asking you to sit on your couch, and which is a great point, but I think the point of that is that like they had the draft, you know what I mean?
Right.
That, like there was sort of like that bottom that has been under you, like that rug could be pulled out from you at any second, right? Like you could be called to go to war. Like, and now it's like people are feeling that bottom being pulled out from under them, and a lot of people don't know what to do if they're not set up to quote unquote survive the situation. And the hope is that you will be calm and reflective and do what you can to survive the situation. The one thing that I'm not like a huge fan of at the moment is I feel like people are just like doing too much. I'm feeling very overwhelmed by the amount of energy that's being put out in the universe. I also think obviously there's going to be a lot of beauty that comes from that, but I do feel like this is a moment where people need to just reset. I'm kind of amazed. I don't know if this is like going on your point, but
I love it. No, I keep going, man. You're riffing. You're on fire.
I just read this story about dolphins swimming in the Venice canals, right? Like this is going to be the environment's going to heal from this. I think maybe that's part of this cancer that's happening right now with the virus. It's like this is the world, the world needs a great healing process, and this is like a very unexpected one that I think is going to obviously have huge awful repercussions, and I am not looking forward to those and seeing how it affects my friends and family, but at the same time I think there's going to be a lot of positive that comes out of this too.
You think it's are we witnessing Darwinism in the real time?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck
yeah. That's what this is, man.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I feel you.
And who knows? Who am I to say who's the fittest or not? But it's like, hunker down, man. Get what you can.
Take what you need. That's what the classic. Take what you need and leave the rest. That's what Dylan said. And baby, it's all over now, baby.
And leave the rest. When you awake, you'll remember everything.
Oh, but the reality is, we got to do set 2 as soon as possible. But as we've been cooking here for 66 minutes, I just wanted to ask you. I think you're very eloquent about the coming out on the other side of this and the sun that will be shining and the potential benefits of this catastrophe. But in anything, in business, in music, as in a band, in production, in order to create trust or in order to see the light, there needs to be an element of conflict and resolution of that conflict. And I just would love you to talk to the audience about a time in your career when you were facing adversity it could be in anything, and how you overcame it, and how it made you a stronger person and producer and all things music.
Whew. That is a big question.
Dropping the hammer on you, dude.
Yeah, and God, try to think of a good story to relay.
And we could save it for part 2 if you want. I'm just saying.
Maybe we could save it for part 2.
Well, let's save it for part 2.
I think right now, I think, and something I'd love to get into is the movie that I've been working on about Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and I'm currently in, that holding pattern that everyone's in right now. Like I've been working on this project for almost 5 years, and it was supposed to come out in April, like the first screening, and everything's delayed. And how do you navigate that like, what does it even mean to put out a project like that now?
Well, hold on for a second. Hold. No, you need to take your own advice and
Yeah.
and just sit and be still, because
Exactly.
it will come back around. Have you pursued or is Keltner or Jim Gordon in the film?
Keltner's in the film.
He's a dear friend. I've done 4, and I love Jimmy so much. But I mean, Gordon
He's
is
the man.
Yeah, he's the freaking man,
Gordon,
dude.
I could talk to you for hours about Jim Gordon.
Wait, I mean,
Jim Gordon,
he doesn't want any. He
Gordon
doesn't want any help. He doesn't want anything.
He's in the film as a subject. He it's very difficult to get a hold of him.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I've tried, but to no avail.
And in fact, I think even if you got into there, I've been told that he wants nothing to do with any. I don't know. The whole thing is slight.
I don't blame him.
No, but I mean, to be honest with you, it's magical. Even though I don't perseverate on those records, they were like one of the double drum bands that with Keltner and Gordon, I just would have loved to have seen those cats playing double drums together. You know.
God. I mean, there's a record that I love. Keltner and Gordon, and I actually tried to make a documentary about Gordon, and maybe something I might pursue at some point.
Dude, let's get to the jail, man. Let's get in. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, listen. You know, the point is that he has to.
But yeah. I was gonna before we go into that, I was gonna say, if you want fucking heavy, if you need something to dance to, Pressure Cooker, Delma Houston. That's the record. I've got the music in me.
Oh, dude, wait, hold on a second. That's Keltner on there. No, I know that one. That's Keltner
and Gordon. Keltner and Gordon.
Are you sure Gordon's on that? I mean, because that's my favorite album. That's that's on like audiophile pressing. That's like my favorite album.
Step in Time and the.
Oh my God, I got the. I mean, Pressure Cooker is the sick. Michael Omardian, I think, is playing organ. It's the most sickest album I've ever. There was just something that flashed in my mind. Oh no! Before I let you go, I need to get this information because this was really where the rubber meets the road for Jake Feinberg. Was I found this insane funk album from the early '70s, mercurial, beautiful female Claudia Lanier. How in the heck? Where did that come? Where? That woman is a badass. I mean, I've been looking for her.
Mad Dogs.
Oh my!
Mad Dogs.
Was she a singer in the Mad Dogs?
She's a friend. Yeah.
My
she
God.
sang with Mad Dogs. She is.
Holy God.
She is the tenor. She is that. Sorry, she's like that alto in the Mad Dogs choir. Like, if you don't have Claudia Lanier in the Mad Dogs and Englishman Space Choir, you don't have that choir.
Wow.
That's like when we did the reunion show with the Tedeschi Trucks in 2015. We always talk about this, like at the first rehearsal. Like, we knew we had it when Claudia started singing. The first song they rehearsed was The Letter, and it was like when that chorus came in, and then her voice just like, oh wait, like that's it. That's the Mad Dog sound. It's Claudia Lanier, you know. Like, yeah, you could have everyone else, and everyone else could emulate it, but without Claudia, that like made the sound. But yeah, she's got that record.
You know the one I'm talking about, the United. I think it's on UA or something, United Artists or something like that. It's freaking ridiculous.
What's it called?
I can't remember.
Yeah, with the yellow cover.
Exactly, dude. Yeah. Chuck Rainey's. It's the most funkiest album ever. I mean, this. Jesse Lauter.
Yeah, she's got a book coming out, and I actually helped her out with the Mad Dogs chapter in it. I believe the concept of the book is that she got different people to interview her about different aspects of her life. Yeah, the name of the record's Few, Phew, from 73.
That's right, 73, right there. So sick.
Yeah,
so sick.
So hopefully her book's coming out soon. I needed to check in with Claudia Brown.
I mean, listen, we're just man. This is healing me in this time of I forget how you self-contained apocalyptic times. I just feel like, man, like I feel like this is, even if when we put this up online later, people, if it brings a smile to people's faces and people can remember stuff or think about stuff they never thought about before, then we're affecting change in our world. I think that's kind of what you've been doing your whole career, but it's really been an honor to connect. It's been an honor to talk to you, man.
And pleasure's all mine, and an honor to talk to you, Jake.
Yeah, man. We'll do it again real soon.
Awesome.
All right, dude. Be safe, man, and enjoy the day.
You guys be safe out there in Radio Land as well.
Yeah, man. To be cool, man.
Cheers, brother.
Later, Matt. Peace. Oh, man. Legendary cat, Jesse Lauter. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back with Margama later on. Bye-bye.